So today's project is a blast from the past. It is based on a video and a project that I did about 8 years ago. And I'm having fun recreating these projects using different products or current products or just with a different twist. And today's project uses acrylic paint and our cardstock and our embossing folders. And I'm going to show you how you can use those supplies to create a beautiful distressed background for your cards and projects. So you ready to see how this is done? Let's get stamping. For this technique, you can use any kind of acrylic paint. So I have a red, this is Indian red and wicker white. And what I have already done is I have taken a piece of our Night of Navy cardstock and I have painted it with white. And you can see it's still a little bit wet. This is 2 coats and I'm going to speed dry that with my heat tool in just a moment. But I want to show you I have another piece here and this is with the red. So I'm just going to zap those and show you how I apply the paint. Okay, so these are dry. So I'm going to add a second coat. I don't need a second coat on this one because 2 coats was plenty. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my little plate back and I'm just using a regular paintbrush. You can use a foam brush, whatever you want. I'm going to just put a little bit of paint and get my little water container out. Good to have some paper towel on hand when you're doing this as well. All right, so I'm just picking up some paint and I'm just as easy as that adding my paint. Just as you normally do when you're painting anything. So you could keep this 1 layer of paint, you can add 2 or 3 coats. It just depends on the look you're going for, how vibrant you want the color to be. I like to do 2 coats because it hides any streaks of paint for the most part. So now these are both dry, I'm going to cut them down. So I'm just going to cut them down to measure 4 by 5 1/4. So now the fun part. This is where I'm going to do my embossing. So I have pulled out 2 embossing folders. So this one is the Breeze and Flourish, and this one is Winter Snowflake. This is new in our mini catalog. So I'm going to start with my red in the Parisian one. Now I want the bumps on bottom. That's how I know that I'm going to have the raised image from the embossing folder on the top. So I always just think bumps on bottom. This part here is indented. So that's a really good way to remember, at least it is for me. And this has a flower in the center and I kind of want to center my paper so I have that pretty flower in the middle because the design of this folder is going to do a lot of the work on this card for me and make it beautiful. Okay, so that's good. Now because this is a 3D embossing folder, I don't need to use our clear plates. What I need to use instead is this gray plate here, which is plate number 4. So I'm just putting my embossing folder underneath that, putting it on my platform, the gray on top, and just crank it through. Awesome. That is beautiful just like that. That is so gorgeous. All right, let's move on to the snowflakes. So because that is not a 3D embossing folder, I'm going to put my clear plate down. And again with the bumps on the bottom. So this is the raised design underneath. And my plate on top. And run that through. And again, that looks sensational. So I guess if you're ever stuck and you don't have a certain color of cardstock, but you've got that color in paint, now you know how you can change your paper. Okay, so I've just got some computer paper that I'm going to put underneath because now is where the distressing technique comes in. I'm using just some fine grit sandpaper and I am going to very lightly sand the top of this. Now, for some people, the sound might drive you a little bit crazy, so I'm going to turn the sound off while I do this part. To go in little circles. I went a little bit too hard here and I tore the paper, so you don't want to do that. Just go in light little circles. Just keep doing that until you get the desired look. So now I'm just taking a baby wipe because I want to take off any dust that's on here from doing that sanding. And look how beautiful this is. You can use this for so many different projects. And you can go back in after you do this. If you think, oh, I want a little bit more white here and here like I do, then you can just go right back in. So pretty, except for the two bits where I tore the paper, but that's because I went too hard. But I don't worry about things like that because it adds to the look, first of all, and you can always cover it up with anything you want. So I have no idea how I'm going to be using this piece yet, but I know it's going to be good, and let's stay tuned and see what happens. So now let's bring in the white on top of the blue. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I could have done white paper with blue paint and then my snowflakes would come out white, but I didn't know what embossing folder I was going to use. This is, again, one of those videos where I just go for it. Okay, this is pretty worn down, plus I've got the red paint. So I went into our garage and grabbed some more sandpaper. So you want to make sure you've got some sandpaper that's not too well worn. And look, that's working so much better. Now, there are so many different techniques we can use with our embossing folders. So we can use ink right on our embossing folders and then run the paper through. But with the paint, you get a whole different look, and of course you get an entirely different texture. But how fun is that? It's so beautiful. So now I'm going to turn these into some cards. All right, so I have cut a piece of Night of Navy cardstock. So this measures 5.5 by 4.25, and I'm going to cut some of our new Snowflake Splendor ribbon. So let's trim that off, and I'm going to put some Stampin' Seal on this. Sentiment, I love the sentiment that's in Peaceful Boughs. May the spirit of peace gently fill your heart and home in this most wonderful time of year. So I want to use that one. So I'm going to stamp that on a piece of Whisper White cardstock. And I'm going to ink this first with my Balmy Blue. And then I'm going to bring in my Night of Navy marker and highlight some of the words. Go ahead and stamp this onto my cardstock. I'm going to stamp it here because I'm going to cut this with the die, and I have no idea what die I'm using yet. Oh my goodness, look at that with the two colors. So I stamped it with the light ink first because it's a lot easier to go over with a dark ink. So I just took a look in my beautiful bow dies, and this is perfect. I want to use this one. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. So when you're using your thin dies, you're going to put the number 2 plate in here. And then your clear plate, your paper, and your die. Alright, so we have our die cut. I'm going to put that on the card with some dimensionals. Then I'm going to make a bow. And that's going to go on just like so. Little paper for the inside. And I can stamp that later. I tend to stamp the inside of my cards just before I'm addressing them to people so that I can really customize what I stamp on the inside and maybe how I do any extra stamping for decorating. But I do want to add some bling to this, so I'm going to grab some rhinestones. Now we do have gorgeous new blue adhesive backed gems. I don't have them yet, but they would have been gorgeous on this. But that's okay. Our diamonds are pretty sensational as well. So I'm just going to put a few diamonds randomly in the center of some of these bigger snowflakes. Fine tip glue pen, and I'm just going to add a few dots of glue and then add my sequins just to add a little bit of shazam to this. Now I always like to squeeze this out first on a bit of scrap paper to make sure I'm not going to get a big blob. There's the finished card, and the sequins I used have some hues of pink in there, and I love that just to add a little pop of color, because if you look at this gorgeous Snowflake Splendor ribbon, it's iridescent, so it also has some of that pink in there, so I thought those would pull out the pink, and they definitely did. It's so pretty. Such a beautiful technique. I love that rustic paint coming through. You can't get that same look with ink. So it's a really fun way to stretch out our embossing folders and supplies to get an even different look. So now I have my red piece. So now I need to figure out what I'm going to do with this, how I'm going to turn this into a card. So for this one, I have gone ahead and taken this beautiful die from our ornate layer dies, and I am going to line that up and run that through. So before I pop this out, I like to flip it over and make sure it has cut all the way through, which it has. So I am just going to take all those little bits out of the die. Another piece of Whisper White, and I'm going to do another oldie but goodie technique, and this is ruffling up the edges just using your fingertip. My goodness, I'm telling you, when I first started with Stampin' Up! Many moons ago, everybody was doing this to their paper, and it just adds to that vintagey look. So I'm just going right around with my fingernail, and if the paper tears a little bit, that just adds to the look. Alright, so I have a piece of crumb cake cardstock, and I want to stamp this, so I'm going to use my birch background, and I'm going to ink this with soft suede. See, I didn't think about doing this before I ruffled those ends, but that's okay. I like to put the paper on top too, so I don't get ink all over my hands. There, that's cool. Okay, so now I'm just cutting a couple butterflies out of some scrap pieces of Designer Series paper, and this is from our World of Good. I'm just playing around until I get what I like. I'm just gonna curl these wings a little bit, give it a bit of a dimension. Okay. Now then, do we want the card to go this way or that way? I think I better wait until I get my little sentiment on there. I have a feeling it might go that way. In fact, I can tell you I really like that. And I've been using this stamp set so much since I got it. I'm going to use Have a Beautiful Day on this card, and then I can stamp Happy Birthday on the inside. So this is going to be for my banner. And this little strip of paper that I cut off when I was trimming this, I'm just going to stamp on the back side of that. Why not? Let's go that way because this bit can get hidden. And I'm going to take our banner punch. And I'm just adding some curves. And I probably don't need that much. Okay. I'm gonna ruffle up the edges on this as well, just to keep it all consistent. So I want this to curve on the card. So I'm gonna bend it up. So I'm bending it up like that, and I'm gonna put a glue dot right behind here so that I can get that curve in there. There we go. And then I'm going to do that again. And I'm going to be seeing my friend in person this weekend, so I don't have to worry about this getting flat in the mail. Butterfly time. So this piece of ribbon is very vanilla. It is from our Forever Greenery trim combo pack, and I'm just going to pull out, look it, I'm just pulling out a string. Go all the way. And then look, I have all these little fibers. Now I'm going to carefully put this down. I'm going to take a piece of linen thread. And I'm going to put this in the middle of that thread, and then I'm just going to tie a bow. It's either going to look good or it's not. And I'm doing this because I want to add some fairy vanilla in there. I want to add some texture. And I don't want the bow that big, so I'm just playing around with it. And then cut this all one length. And now I'm gonna just kind of start pulling all these bits apart. And I'm gonna put this right on the center of the butterfly. Kind of just adds a little extra something something to the butterfly. I wasn't sure how that was going to turn out, to be honest, but I really like it. I think it looks really pretty. It kind of just adds to the butterfly wings. All right. And to finish the card, I'm just putting a champagne rhinestone right in the center. I am so pleased with that. I am going to stamp the inside, and since I do know who this is for and the occasion, I'm going to go ahead and stamp her birthday. So for that, I'm going to use my Peaceful Moments. So even though I used paint on this, I think my real red would be pretty close to matching that. So I'm going to stamp the happy birthday with real red. I'm going to stamp it up near the top. And then I'm going to stamp in soft suede, I'm going to stamp the sentiment, wishing you every happiness this special day will bring. I like how those come down like that. That looks really pretty. And I'm pulling out yet another stamp set. I'm going to use today's tiles because I want to stamp Namaste, because this friend of mine, her and I just had a discussion recently about meditation. We both thoroughly enjoy meditation, so I think having a Namaste on her card will really personalize this. So there we go. The inside is stamped. I am very, very happy with how that turned out. Let's look at the first one that I did with the snowflakes. Pretty, it's simple, and in real life you can really see that different texture that I have by using paint. Such a cool technique. So this project was based on the very first video I made in 2012, and I have had such a great time creating these cards based on that technique that I have not done for all these years. I hope I've inspired you to give this technique a try, and I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and happy stamping.